Da har jeg og min medforfatter Tom Solstad lansert boken Frykt og stillhet, jødiske stemmer i Norge etter 7. oktober. Denne boken får du tak i på nett hos Nordli eller Ark, og du får tak i den hos de fleste butikker rundt omkring i Norge, og hvis de ikke har den, så kan du be dem om å bestille den opp. Denne boken handler om nettopp tiden fra 7. oktober 2023 og frem til, i våre dager, nå 2 år etterpå. Hvordan har dette vært for jødiske nordmenn her i landet? Hvordan har det vært å oppleve denne nettopp frykten og stillheten? Og frykten spiller jo på nettopp frykten for å bære jødiske symboler, som det jeg har på meg her, en davidsstjerne, eller kippa, eller snakke hebraisk seg imellom, eller bare rett og slett fortelle at man er jødisk. Den frykten for å avsløre at man har en jødisk identitet, og stillheten handler om nettopp denne stillheten som veldig mange møtte, både i familierelasjoner, blant venner, kolleger på arbeidsplasser rundt omkring, hvor mange jøder og israelere møtte en usynliggjøring, nettopp ved at man feier dette temaet under teppet, ikke vil ta i det, at man føler at man blir isolert, fordi det er ikke lov til å stå opp og si at jeg støtter Israels forsvarskrig, eller jeg støtter at Israel har rett til å forsvare seg, eller rett til å eksistere, eller å si at jeg er sionist, eller at jeg er jødisk i det hele tatt. Så mitt håp for denne boka er at denne her skal bli en brannfakkel inn i den norske debatten, at denne her skal sette i gang, den skal starte en debatt og en diskurs, og at det kommer kronikker og debattinnlegg og en offentlig samtale om har vi sviktet våre jøder på nytt igjen i 2025? Hvordan kan vi bli et enda bedre samfunn? Hvordan kan vi få mindre antisemittisme her i Norge? Hvordan kan vi bli et mer inkluderende samfunn også når det gjelder jøder og israelere? Og hvordan kan vi bli et bedre samfunn generelt? Så kjøp boka, ta en titt på den, og les den. Eytan Halon, thank you so much for coming to my podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And I have to first congratulate you on your new book.
Thank you.
So congratulations.
Thank you. It was wonderful to be able to publish that book, because not only for me and my co-author, but I think for Norwegian society to... what I really hope for is that it will spark a debate and will spark a discussion about what happened in Norway in particular after October 7th, and how unfortunately we've seen an uprise in anti-Semitism in Norway. Like, that's such a paradoxical effect. Like, after the greatest attack on Israel, on Jews since the Holocaust,
right,
you would assume like some sympathy or some empathy, but instead we see the paradoxical opposite of it.
You would think so, but it's we've seen it before. This isn't the first time. Every time there's an escalation in the Middle East, Jewish communities across the world pay the price. And we saw what happened in Manchester a couple of weeks ago. This is the city which I grew up in. That is the result of when protesters around the world chant, globalize the intifada. We all know what that means. That means violence. That's the real world effect of that demand. And it is a tragic but seemingly inevitable consequence. Whenever there's an escalation in the Middle East, Jewish communities, including in Norway, pay the price.
But why is that, you think? Why do we have that paradoxical effect, though? Like, hate creates just more hate. Why is that in particular?
I think, hate of Jews is nothing new. It always has been. It always will be. And perhaps there are those who simply look for an excuse, or that hatred towards Jews during times of escalation and war in the Middle East becomes somewhat normalized. And there are those who feel that this is the opportunity to go out and do what they... I don't think anybody wakes up on the October the 7th, sees the slaughter of Jews and says, well, maybe they're right. I also hate Jews. I'm going to go to a synagogue and murder a couple of people. It's something that has always existed. Something about the state of Israel defending itself gets people very activated, and it drives people to go to those extremes. And it's a horrific but seemingly inevitable consequence.
What was it like growing up in Manchester, like in particular, as you mentioned, the horrible attack that was now just a couple of weeks ago, I think,
yes,
where was it 2 Jews that died?
Yeah.
Is that symptomatic of Manchester? Is this something new? Did that shock you, or did you almost expect those kinds of terror attacks in Manchester in particular?
I think within the British Jewish community, it was shocking but not surprising. Amazingly, this is the first lethal anti-Semitic attack in the UK since Jews returned to the UK centuries ago. They haven't experienced the same violent anti-Semitism that they experienced in France, in Germany, other places, Belgium, other places across Europe. But that's not to say that they weren't aware of the anti-Semitism within British society. So many of them thought, well, this is really just a matter of time until something like this happens. And they were proved right. And, well, perhaps it's a surprise that it took so long. But growing up in the UK, I think we were aware that there was this anti-Semitism. We used to call it dinner table anti-Semitism. So people maybe around the dinner table would say, well, you know, the Jews control this and the Jews control that. There's this sort of undercurrent of anti-Semitism. But this violent anti-Semitism was not part of that experience growing up and not part of British Jewry. No matter whether you're today young or old, they haven't experienced something like that. So, as I said, it was shocking but not necessarily surprising.
Did people use like the word Jew as a derogatory term, like in school, and was that a common phrase to use?
Not necessarily to me, but it does exist. So there was this undercurrent. They might not say it to your face, but you can pretty sure that behind closed doors, well, here's the Jews doing it again, or all these stereotypes regarding Jews and Jewish culture.
What do you think about that undercurrent? Do you think that is just something we have to live with, or do you find that to be dangerous in terms of when October 7th happened and all of this stuff happening, that undercurrent which already is there, is that what makes it so easy to take the next step for terror and for dehumanization and for attacks, because that undercurrent is already there?
So I think some of that undercurrent is the result of ignorance. Mm-hmm. Those who just simply haven't met Jewish people, and they hear these stereotypes and they see that there are Jewish people in high up positions and are successful. It ultimately is the result of hard work. But if you haven't met Jews and you may be ignorant, then that enables anti-Semitism to rise. But there are those who are anti-Semitic because they've been taught to hate Jews, and it's those who ultimately become more and more extreme, and some who take the most extreme act and say, okay, I'm going to go out and do something about it. And that results in the murder of 2 Jews outside the synagogue on Yom Kippur. They have no relation to what is happening in the Middle East. But time and time again, it's shown that Jews around the world pay the price for a conflict that happens thousands of miles away.
Now, you are the Chargé d'Affaires here in Norway, at the Israel Embassy here in Norway. Which is welcome, by the way. You're taking over from Jana, who I knew also, and my listeners knew. And let's talk about the fact that you don't formally have an ambassador here in Norway still, going on almost a year, I think, or
even
so.
More. Yes.
Even more, right?
Yeah.
Well, what is that political signal to Norway, and why don't you have an ambassador in Norway?
So, the withdrawal of the ambassador was really the culmination of a few steps, but ultimately reflected Norway's decision, together with the Spanish and the Irish, to recognize a Palestinian state early in 2024. And that statement, by returning our ambassador back to Israel, a very experienced ambassador, one of the most experienced we have in our ministry, is saying, your decision is not okay. Your decision does not contribute to peace. It does not contribute to a peaceful prospect in the Middle East. By recognizing a Palestinian state unilaterally, the only thing it does is push peace further away. It teaches the Palestinians that you don't have to come to the negotiating table. Everything that you want, we'll give you. No need for concessions. No need to make hard decisions. No need to make reforms. About a year and a half, no, even less, approximately half a year, 8 months after the worst terrorist attack against Jews since the Holocaust, say, okay, here's your reward. You massacred 1,200 Jews. You took 250 people hostage. You were still holding on to a lot of them then. And here's your reward, a Palestinian state. So in what way does that bring a peaceful solution in the Middle East closer? We've seen in these days what brings a peaceful solution closer. That's bringing all the relevant parties to the table, making some tough decisions, finding a way to reach a ceasefire, and looking towards the day after. Recognizing a Palestinian state unilaterally does not do any of that. And we decided the right thing to do was to withdraw our ambassador in protest. And since then, nothing has changed.
But what makes you not take the next step? As we all know, like in Ireland, you have closed the embassy completely. That is like the next political step, I guess. What has made you not go that far, but remaining having an open embassy?
Well, closing an embassy is a drastic step. And we're not interested in doing so. It's about telling the Norwegians that recognizing a Palestinian state was not the correct thing to do. Incredibly problematic, incredibly harmful to the chances of peace. And withdrawing our ambassador was our way of saying, that's not right. And really, you should reconsider your decision.
What do you think it takes for Israel to yet again have an ambassador here in Norway? What requirements, what would need to happen for that to happen?
I can't say there's something specific that I can put my finger on now and say this is what is required. But the direction of foreign policy since the start of the war led us to take that action. If there was to be a substantial change in that foreign policy, and we return to a constructive dialogue, which enables us to move forward bilaterally between Norway and Israel, then maybe something can change. But thankfully, I'm not the one making that decision.
Yeah.
So it's my superiors in the ministry in Jerusalem.
It's as we are speaking now, it's been a really interesting and wonderful few days in terms of our hostages, the Israeli hostages coming back home, the living ones at least. It was both for me and many Jewish people and Israeli people that I know here in Norway like a huge relief, and I find it to be a miracle, frankly, that you were able to actually get all the living hostages out. How has this been for you and for Israel to get the living hostages back home?
So it's a moment that we dreamed of, we tried to imagine for 2 years, bringing everyone home and saving their lives. It's not just about bringing them home, but it's about saving the lives of those 20 living hostages who came back. You, like me, we saw the scenes in Israel, the celebrations, the euphoria. These people who have been in captivity and their families have entered the hearts of every single Israeli home. We've seen them on TV every single day and night for the last 2 years. We feel like we know them. We feel like we know their families. So to bring them home, it's not just about them being reunited. It's about us as a society, being reunited. And we can't move on from October the 7th and those horrific attacks until everybody comes back. So today, we still have 19 deceased hostages. And in Judaism and in the Jewish state, it's, as you know, very important not just to bring back the living ones, but to every person receives the proper burial and enables their family also to receive some sort of end to this horrific story. So personally, I'm going to be keeping on my yellow pin, calling for the hostages to come home until every single one of those 19 return back for burial. And I hope it happens soon. And all the pressure is on Hamas to do the maximum and to return those hostages just as they are required to within this peace deal that has been signed.
What do you think about that, Hamas seemingly now not upholding their part of the deal? I just want to interject one thought that I came up with. I saw one person comment that on Facebook just now before we went live, is that it's a good point because Hamas, they're so efficient and so fast in counting deceased people on their side whenever there's some kind of bombing or some kind of war efforts by Israel. They know exactly, like the minute after, how many people were killed, who they were, everything. But when it comes to supposedly, right?
Yes.
But when it comes to finding the few Israeli deceased hostages, they suddenly can't do it.
Of course. Well, Henrik, a terror organization will continue to act like a terrorist organization. Nothing in the Trump plan changed the identity and the behavior of this organization. They always have been a terrorist organization. As long as they exist, they will continue to act like a terrorist organization. And they will do everything that they can. I mean, they lost the war, but they will do everything that they can to continue in whatever way they can to, I guess, achieve small victories. We saw on the day of the release of the hostages, the living hostages, that the parents of the hostages who hadn't yet been released, but were due to be released later in the day, received video calls from their children or family members while still in captivity, alongside them a masked Hamas member, in this final attempt, in the final hours of their captivity, to achieve some sort of psychological warfare victory. They will do that as long as they can, and their only negotiating tool, the only cards that they have left, are the bodies of the deceased hostages. After that, they have nothing left to hold on to. So it's shocking, but again, it's not surprising that even in the final, hopefully, final moments of this terrorist organization, they will still do everything to terrorize the Israeli people.
What do you think made Hamas finally go along with this and actually deliver the hostages? Because that's been interesting to me the last couple of days. Like, what in the world? What are the inner workings? Of course, we'll never know like the secret inner workings of this deal. But I just imagine the intense, the huge international pressure. Because that was like probably the security of Hamas to maintain some of the hostages, like their life insurance, right? What in the world made them actually go along with this? What do you think?
I think there are a few aspects. Firstly, Hamas has been defeated on the battlefield. Hamas has been defeated. It's not the military organization that it was today. Maybe it's a guerrilla organization that's able to pop up here and there and attack some soldiers, but it's not the organization that it was. I think different in this deal compared to the previous deals is that the entire world has bought into it, including Hamas's backers. So Qatar supports it, Turkey supports it. The vast majority of the Arab world is behind this plan. Hamas wants to survive in some form, but it needs backing. It can't do it by itself. So for the first time, the entire world has bought into this one plan, and Hamas had no choice but to execute it going forward. Now we see today it's trying to reestablish its control over the Gaza Strip in the most brutal fashion, executing its own people. This is Hamas. We're not surprised by its tactics. But at least in the war against Israel, it has been defeated militarily and diplomatically. Had no choice but to release these hostages.
As you mentioned, like the brutal nature of Hamas that we're seeing today is like, I was just thinking the other day, where are all the pro-Palestinian voices now that Hamas is there killing and torturing their own people, their own Palestinian civilians in the streets? And I would think that if you're truly pro-Palestinian, you want the best for the Palestinian people, which is, I think, a great position that you want the best for Palestinian people. I want the best for Palestinian people, right? But where are their voices now that Israel has retreated the IDF? I'm only hearing silence from them. I would think that if they are truly on the Palestinian civilian side, they would be fighting for peace and especially like welcoming this peace deal. And this is great for the Palestinian people. And we have to fight Hamas. Look at what they're doing towards the civilians in Gaza. But you're hearing none of that. How do you account for that? How do you explain that?
Well, you'll have to ask them yourselves. Yeah. But I've been saying, not just for the last 2 years, that if you are really pro-Palestinian and you care for the best for the Palestinian people, you want the best for them, as you said, as we all do, then the first and primary enemy of the Palestinian people is Hamas. Hamas took over the Gaza Strip almost 20 years ago, in 2007. Even then, it was throwing people off the roofs of buildings, its political opponents. Hamas is not the friend of the Palestinian people. If you are truly pro-Palestinian, then you should be continuing to protest in the streets of Oslo, week in, week out, until Hamas is no more. You should be demanding a government for the Palestinian people, a new leadership in Gaza that cares more for the lives of the Palestinian people than it does for the deaths of the Israeli people on the other side of the border. I'm not holding my breath. In fact, I was shocked just in the last couple of days. I saw this vigil outside the Opera House in Oslo for a Hamas propagandist. They called him a journalist, but we know this guy is not a journalist. He is a member of Hamas and pushes out Hamas propaganda and has been doing so for the last 2 years. If these people are truly friends of the Palestinians, and their reason for gathering over the last 2 years hasn't just been to criticize the state of Israel and to protest the state of Israel and its right to self-defense, then we should continue seeing them outside. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. But for those within the pro-Palestinian movement, and I think there certainly are some who truly care about the welfare of the Palestinians, then we should continue hearing their voice. We should continue hearing their voice on the streets of Oslo, on the streets of capitals in Europe and North America. We should also be hearing it in the parliament, saying that Hamas cannot play any future in the Middle East. If we are interested in a peaceful solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Hamas must be dismantled. There is no peaceful solution in the Middle East in which Hamas still plays a part. It's as simple as that.
That's why I find it so upsetting when people misinterpret, if I give them the benefit of the doubt, if it's coming from a place of ignorance and misinterpretation, that they think like Hamas is just like the military part of an oppressed people, and they have to, they take some extreme steps, but it's all for a good cause. It's like they're just a military wing of this horribly oppressed people, and they're doing the people's will. Well, in fact, they're not doing the people's will at all. No. And then some evidence for that is that I've actually spoken to people in Gaza on my podcast, people brave enough to actually step forward and say, hey, we don't want Hamas. The few people who have been brave enough to demonstrate in Gaza, they're not demonstrating against Israel, they're demonstrating against Hamas. And I find it so unfortunate and so sad that the media and Western media in Norway and everywhere aren't lifting up those voices, because they're paying the price with their lives probably now. They're probably being killed by Hamas for being brave enough to demonstrate against them. And what we should have done in Norway and in the Western media is lifting up those voices and helping them. And look at the inhabitants of Gaza. They don't want Hamas. They want peace with Israel. Why do you think that is? Why aren't we seeing those voices enhanced and focused on?
I think part of it is this idea that the West knows best. Despite this being a conflict in a very different part of the world. Now, geographically, we're on the edge of Europe, but mentality-wise, it's not the same place. It is the Middle East. And things work differently there. Why is there this idea in the West that Hamas can be part of some solution, or we don't need to focus on the poor Palestinians? I don't know. Sometimes the narrative is just, it's perhaps too complex, and people don't want to enter into that complexity. Actually, it's not that complex. Hamas is the enemy of the Palestinian people. That's it. Full stop. But often it's seen as this sort of football match. I'm not sure we should talk about football matches after what happened in Oslo. We can talk about it. But it's this sort of football match between Israel and the Palestinians. And one of the great successes of Hamas in the last 2 years is it manages to erase itself from the story. So you'll see on the news the Israeli army in Gaza, but you'll never see Hamas. Certainly because they don't wear uniform, they don't wear military uniform. But they just disappear. And so you see Israel fighting Gaza, which is obviously not true. Israel was fighting Hamas from day one, from October the 7th, when Hamas declared war on Israel. And we've been fighting them ever since. But when you don't see it, it's difficult maybe to comprehend. It's not that sort of warfare. And Hamas's success, certainly in the PR field, is that it managed to just take itself out. On October the 7th, even though they live streamed and broadcast what they were doing and the massacre of people in their houses, they broadcast it live on the internet and straight onto Al Jazeera. But immediately after that, Israel started acting in self-defense, and it's as if Hamas wasn't there. That's a real PR success as far as Hamas is concerned, but it's also a PR warning for democratic states in the West that fighting this sort of battle, it's not just fighting the battle on the military front, and we were attacked from 7 different fronts, but you're also fighting this media propaganda war in which misinformation, disinformation thrives. And a terrorist organization with the backing of a TV channel, TV news like Al Jazeera, manages to just erase itself from the narrative. And therefore you don't see it on the news here either in Oslo. And maybe that makes for oversimplistic reporting and an inability to go back and tell the real story.
And also what makes it even more complex is that Hamas is putting on civilian clothing, they're putting on press vests,
Yes.
they're putting on whatever they can, hiding in the hospitals, hiding in amongst civilians, wherever. They follow no rules of law, they follow no rules of engagement. So it is an asymmetrical warfare because Israel is actually holding themselves to the laws of warfare while you have to fight an enemy that doesn't care at all.
I mean, that's the strategy. On October the 7th, Hamas turned our communities, our towns into the battlefield with the strategy that the day after we'd come after Hamas in order to and also to rescue our hostages. And the way they work is they turn their own cities and towns and into their own battlefields. I mean, the strategy of Hamas is to increase suffering as much as possible of its own people that Israel will be forced to stop by the international community, and Hamas will be able to live another day. Hamas, as you said, embeds itself in hospitals, in schools, in mosques, under civilian infrastructure, under the most dense parts of the Gaza Strip, because it knows that Israel will have to come after it, and the destruction will be great. And it will be very, very hard in the eyes of people across the world to see this level of destruction. That's Hamas's strategy. Whilst we try to minimize civilian casualties, Hamas says the best thing for us is to have that number go up and up and up. Only by having as many of our women and children killed as possible. We'll put them in front of us. We use them as human shields. We stand behind them, and it just works in our benefit. I mean, that is not only cynical. I mean, it's the real tragedy of the Palestinian people of Gaza. They are the victims of this forever war that Hamas leads, and even today is determined to continue again and again and again. After October the 7th, the first thing that the Hamas leadership said was we want to do it on October the 8th and 9th and 10th and 1,000 and 1 million. Nothing will stop them. The only question is if the international community works together in order to stop them.
Didn't Hamas have that in their charter already from 1987, I think?
Yeah.
Was it that the complete destruction of Israel or something?
Not just Israel, but also Jews around the world, that every Jew is a target around the world. This isn't an organization that can be negotiated with. It's an organization that no matter what is committed to our destruction, no matter the price that its people have to pay for that. You can't sit down around the negotiating table with Hamas and say, okay, well, let's find the mutual areas of interest that you might be able to do in a negotiation between two business partners or two democratic states. That's not what we're talking about. It's as simple as this. Israel wants its people to live and to have secure borders, while Hamas wants Israelis to die and to destroy the state of Israel, and it doesn't care how many of its people die on the way. They're not the only ones in the region. I was asked, what do we have with the Houthis in Yemen or with the Iranians and their nuclear regime? Well, our only problem with the Iranians is that they want to destroy us. Pre-1979 in the Islamic Revolution, Israel and Iran had fantastic relations. We have no issues with the Iranian people. We have an issue with the fact that the Iranian regime wants to wipe us off the map. Similarly, with the Houthis, which isn't the government of Yemen. We have no issue with Yemen. It's a country that's far, far away. Similarly with Iran. Our only issue with the Houthis is that they keep firing ballistic missiles and UAVs at Israeli territory. We have no interest. No interest. That's the only reason that there is this conflict, is because the terrorist organizations and some of the states surrounding us are committed to our destruction. It's that simple.
Why are they committed to your destruction?
Well, it's a religious conflict. It's an ideological conflict. It is impossible in the eyes of extreme radical Islamist organizations that there will be a Jewish entity in the Middle East. Well, it's not just Jews. They don't particularly like anybody who isn't part of this caliphate. That's the issue. We're everything that they oppose. We're a Jewish state, a democratic state. We respect minorities. We want to live in peace. We have this tiny territory. There are more than 50 Muslim majority states out there. But this tiny strip of land from Kiryat Shmona in the north to Eilat, you can drive it in about 6-7 hours from north to south, and it's that thin in the middle. You can go across in about half an hour, 1 hour. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable in their eyes.
It's so weird to think about it when you think like that, because it's like so many Muslim states, but there's only one Jewish state,
right?
And that cannot exist.
right. And it's this Jewish state, this tiny strip of land.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, we have religious history, and Jerusalem is an incredibly important place to 3 Abrahamic faiths. But all we want to do is live. It's really that straightforward, and we respect the minorities in the state of Israel: Christian minority, Muslim minority, Druze, and many others. We're a country that seeks peace, and if you don't attack us, then we can live in peace together, just like we signed peace accords or normalization agreements with the UAE, with Bahrain, and Morocco. Those who want to work together with us will work together with them. And it's for the benefit of our people and their people. And we see it. Us and the other countries that joined the Abraham Accords 5 years ago are enjoying the benefits of it. But not everyone's interested in that.
Yeah, we have to talk about the Abraham Accords too. I just want to bring up one topic, which is kind of complex, because as you said, Israel has nothing against the Iranian people, is the Iranian government. But what is complex with Gaza, I think, is that they actually elected Hamas in there as a democratic election. But it was an election, and also I think it's difficult to put a hard stop, a hard line between these are civilians and this is Hamas, because as we saw on October 7th, a lot of civilians gathered and loved the massacres and joined in on it. And when you saw Israeli civilians being dragged into Gaza, they were running after them, beating them with sticks and whatever. These were like civilians.
Yes.
So how do you deal with that fact? Because then you can't really say anymore that we're just against Hamas, because you also don't want civilians that want October 7th to happen again.
Of course. So our mission from the outset of the war in Gaza was to, amongst other things, destroy the military and the governing capabilities of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Military capabilities, well, it's straightforward. Have to take out every military infrastructure and weapon that is within the Gaza Strip. And there are also other factions, of course, in the Gaza Strip, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, for example. That's the military side of it. And the governing, well, Hamas don't make a distinction between their political and military aims. The political wing of Hamas, so-called, serves its military objectives. Everything goes together. So the average Palestinian on the street shouldn't have anything to worry about. Unfortunately, Hamas works in a way in which the civilians have to pay the price. But our war has never been against the Palestinians. It doesn't matter who they voted for. If they voted for Hamas in 2005 or they voted for the Palestinian Authority, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, our only aim are those who are posing a military or a terrorist threat to the state of Israel.
Yeah, because I've read testimonies from some of the hostages that were fortunately brought back alive, and some of those women said, like, quote, like, there are no real innocent people in Gaza. They were all mean to me and terrible to me. And actually, at some point, well, at one point, I think Hamas had to protect the hostages from the civilians in Gaza because there was so much hate, so much anger, so much fury towards the hostages. Isn't that a problem also that hate towards Israel and Jews is so ingrained in the population?
So it's the result of decades of incitement. And part of the plan going forward, and we said it from the start, and it's been embraced in the current plan that we're just at the beginning of this plan. But the plan also envisions not just the demilitarization of Gaza, but the de-radicalization of Gaza. That starts from the school books. In the schools in Gaza, the day after the war, the children are taught not to hate Jews, but are taught, like we are taught in Israeli schools, to work towards peace and to work towards coexistence. But the schools are full of incitement within the Palestinian Authority and the schools in Gaza, operated usually by UNRWA, the UN organization, which has been found to be completely infested with terrorism and support for terrorism. It starts from there. It starts also with, let's put it this way, it has to be bottom up and top down. Bottom up, that the kids are not taught to hate. It has to come top down, that their leadership does not work and incite and encourage hate towards Israel. It has to come from both directions. Honestly, I think the average Palestinian is interested in a better life for himself or herself and her family. That they go to work, they earn money, they have plenty to eat. Like all of us, that's what matters at the end of the day. Palestinians need to be given a reason to hope. And within this plan, a new government should be formed that really takes their needs and promotes their needs. And then once you have something to live for, then I think most Palestinians who just want a quiet life will be able to enjoy that quiet life. But it requires a lot of work and it requires an international effort. But ultimately, most people like us, they want to wake up in the morning, go to work, provide for their families, and enjoy a peaceful life. The last thing that they want is that every 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, Hamas or another terrorist organization will wage another war against Israel. And then you see the result. Nobody's interested in that.
Some of the criticisms that Israel has gotten is that during the war, Israel really didn't, in any large amount, let in journalists and the press into Gaza to report, and by that perhaps building up underneath fantasies and theories and conspiracy theories about what Israel really was doing there. What do you think about that? Do you have an answer for that? Why Israel didn't let the press in?
So it's very simple. The international media was not allowed in because we were concerned for their safety. The Gaza is an incredibly complex battlefield. Buildings and roads, they're all booby-trapped, and IEDs and explosives and as you said yourself, Hamas operatives using press jackets, for example, in order to press jackets, humanitarian work, posing as everything in order to do what they want to do and commit further terror acts. Now we said it's simply not safe. It's simply not safe for foreign journalists to walk around and be exposed to these threats. Now, we've received quite a lot of criticism for it, but I must say, we look at the reporting coming out of Gaza, and I said this to a few journalists I met with last week. It's not as if the reports coming out of Gaza are particularly favorable towards Israel. No, at the moment, Hamas and Al Jazeera work together to push everything that they want outside of Gaza. So I said to them, it's not as if we're not letting you in because we're trying to control some positive narrative. It's not. As soon as it's considered safe, then it is in our interest and in the interest of journalists to be safe and they can go back in.
Are you also concerned that international journalists might get kidnapped too?
Look, there are reports, including from the Committee for the Protection of Journalists, about the threats that they face from Hamas, going years back. I mean, this is nothing new. It's not possible for you as a reporter in Gaza to report fairly or accurately because you'll be threatened. It's not the only place in the world. If you want to speak to a person on the street in Gaza, well, that person is thinking automatically, well, if I expose myself now and I say anything against Hamas, well, they'll come knocking on my door very soon and in many cases may well be executed. So journalists face intimidation and threats. The people they want to talk to face intimidation and threats. And Gaza is full of explosives and has been booby-trapped in a way which is meant for Israeli soldiers, but ultimately also threatens journalists. So all of these things put together, look, I understand why journalists want to go in. But at the same time, we know how they are either exploited, certainly endangered, and that's not something that we as a state want to expose them to.
What is also a problem is that the media here in Norway, at least, and probably all Western media, is that then they're using the journalists who actually live in Gaza and presenting them as like some kind of neutral journalist. Our reporter in Gaza is saying so and so, while knowing that they can't have a critical angle towards Hamas. Correct. Because they'll be killed, they'll be executed in the streets. Like, what do you think about that? Well, hei, kjære lyttere og seere, og tusen takk for at du hører på Henrik Beckheim podcast. Denne podden mottar ikke noe statsstøtte eller pressestøtte, men hvis du har lyst til å hjelpe til og bidra til dette arbeidet som jeg forsøker å gjøre med å belyse andre perspektiver enn det som kommer frem i riksmediene, og du har lyst til å støtte arbeidet med dette her videre, så kan du vippse et valgfritt beløp til vips nummer 82 32 78. Jeg setter veldig stor pris på et hvert beløp som du har lyst til å gi, og det betyr mye for videre produksjon av denne podcasten. Tusen takk.
Some journalists come to me and say, well, you always criticize us for using Hamas numbers. The Hamas Ministry of Health says this and this and this. Look, I don't think that going into Gaza will enable journalists to go to the hospitals and count the bodies of terrorists and come out with any sort of different reporting. But ultimately, that's not the reason. The reason is a matter of safety, and that in this incredibly complex arena, it would be detrimental and very dangerous for them to be wandering amongst within the combat zone. That's the reason.
Also, let's talk about the perception that people, at least here in Norway, have, I think, is that if I put myself in their shoes, in their heads, I think that a lot of people who don't know a lot about this conflict, who only watch NRK and read VG and these the main newspapers, think that they have an idea. I would say they probably think that Israel is just carpet bombing the whole of Gaza at all times, just enjoying as many civilian deaths as possible and doing it out of some kind of vengeance and revenge and, that kind of extreme view. But let's take this apart a little bit. Is it so that Israel is just carpet bombing the whole of the Gaza Strip, or what kind of precautions do Israel take before it has a military operation some places? What does it do to avoid civilian casualties?
So this is often the simplicity of the reporting. But as we've seen time and time and again, Israel, before it acts, will take more precautions than any other military has in the modern era to prevent civilian casualties. Now, unfortunately, it's impossible to prevent civilian casualties entirely, especially when fighting against a Hamas strategy of using human shields. But take, for example, the recent offensive in Gaza City. Before entering Gaza City, we gave time to the civilians to move to safer humanitarian areas, dropped tens of thousands, if not millions, of leaflets informing Palestinian civilians where to go, where they can be safe. Phone calls and messages to the mobile phones of all living in that area saying, this place is going to become a combat zone soon. Please, for your own safety, move to these humanitarian areas. At the same time, increasing and driving forward the amount of humanitarian aid that reaches those areas. And so waiting a certain amount of time before starting the offensive. Now, this is something that no military has done before. And the destruction in Gaza, well, it's not the only place where where the international community has to deal with urban warfare against terrorists. If you look at the damage in Mosul, when the international coalition fought ISIS, destruction there was horrific. That's unfortunately the nature of it. So we're doing everything that we can. Now, we're evacuating these civilians for their safety, and we're criticized for it, because some will say, our critics, those who are marching in the streets, will say, no, it's forced displacement. You're displacing them from their homes. So, on one hand, we try and reduce civilian casualties, and we're criticized for it. So, what's preferable? We're trying to move them out of the area of the offensive and combat before it happens. So it doesn't matter. The reporting and the criticism will come no matter what.
So damned if you do and damned
Absolutely.
if you don't, really.
Absolutely. But we will always do it.
Yeah.
We will always do it, because the reporting in the international media doesn't dictate, how we morally conduct our operations.
That's another issue as well, because Israel also has been criticized for not communicating enough, right, internationally, not telling the world media, not telling the world stage what they're actually doing, what Israel is doing, what the plan is, what the short-term plan is, what the long-term plan for Gaza is. Of course, you're always being criticized, but also a lot of Israeli voices have been criticizing Israel for this, like Javier Retigo really wanted Israel to communicate, and also for, not just for Israel, but also for diaspora Jews living here, because we get all this backlash for Israel not communicating that, and that generates a lot of conspiracy theories about what Israel wants to do and what the ambition is. What do you think about that? Has Israel done enough on the communication front, or could Israel been better at telling the world and communicating what their plan is?
Well, I think there's always room for improvement. My job as a diplomat is to speak to the politicians, speak to the media, speak to as many channels as possible. I was reading an interesting post on Facebook the other day about Israel's PR. Now, our top priority is defending our own people. And alongside that, there is the need to work in the media and explain what are we doing and why are we doing. The essence of this post, and I think it's very accurate, is that it's not about good PR and bad PR. It's about there are countries in the world or forces that are able to buy influence and buy PR. And we see the success in Hamas, especially alongside Qatar, in doing it. Israel, we're a small country with 10 million people. And with the Jewish diaspora, some feel they want to speak up and support Israel, but there's obviously no obligation. Whereas Hamas, through Qatar and other Arab nations, pour a huge amount of money into communicating and essentially the propaganda effort on behalf of Hamas. Whether it's Al Jazeera, the amount that Qatar spends on adverts from Sky News and has been doing for many, many years. It's not about good communication or poor communication. It's about often the ability to buy those channels for communication. And I can appear on Norwegian media, and I wish I would appear more on Norwegian media, but they're not always interested in inviting me and having me give the Israeli side of the story, which I think is very regrettable. So people don't hear us all the time. They see the pictures from Gaza, which we're all saddened by the situation in Gaza, and people put two and two together and they reach a conclusion. We had a lot of sympathy after October the 7th. The world saw the horrific acts that happened. And for a while, that gave Israel this, let's say this, it was easy for us to explain. But memories are short, and it only took a few days or a few weeks before that was forgotten. And Israel started acting in self-defense. People saw the images. Going back to what we said earlier, they didn't see Hamas anywhere. They just saw, the effect of Israeli military action. And alongside those images, it's quite difficult to go back and tell the entire story. And the media often isn't interested in telling the entire story. Whilst we are still stuck in October the 7th and everything that happened there, the media has moved on. It doesn't have the time to start every news broadcast with, this is the reason why Israel is fighting. And that's everything is very simplified and fit into short reports.
Is it almost like Israel has enough trouble defending itself on 7 fronts and surviving, and you don't want to waste energy on these media companies that don't believe you anyway?
Well, it's not about wasting energy, but the most important thing is that we defend ourselves. After that, we will also explain. It's very difficult to explain if the West doesn't see the clear justification. We attacked Iran because they were on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon. If it's not clear that the only reason that Iran wants a nuclear weapon is to destroy Israel off if people really believe that Iran is doing this for peaceful purposes, and that's what the Iranians say, nobody believes them. Well, nobody should believe them. We act ultimately in self-defense, and that is the most important thing. I think Golda Meir said something along the lines of, we'd rather be alive and disliked than dead and pitied. And that is the key part of any state. That's what any citizen would expect their state to do. The citizens of Norway expect Norway to look after their safety and their security needs, first and foremost. After that, we can start talking about communication and PR and the reputation. Now, we know that we paid a price in the eyes of the international community, but that's okay, because the most important thing is that our civilians aren't going to be slaughtered again in their beds in another October the 7th style attack. And today, after being attacked on multiple fronts, can confidently say that the Middle East is a lot safer today for the civilians of the State of Israel, not just for the State of Israel, for all peace-loving people, than it was 2 years ago. And have we paid a price for that in terms of reputation and in the eyes of the public in many countries? Yes, but that's okay. Our first duty and responsibility is to look after our own people.
When you think about the term genocide, do you view that as a blood libel against Israel?
It's not the first time that these terms have been thrown around. It's about using the most emotionally loaded words in order to turn public opinion against the State of Israel. So these sorts of terms have been used for the past 75 years plus. And it does two things. Firstly, it completely weakens the word itself. It takes the entire meaning out of the word. If every act of self-defense is suddenly called genocide, then genocide has no meaning. It's a politically and emotionally loaded term, especially in the case of the Jews who went through the Holocaust. 6 million were slaughtered, and now you're using those words or the experience of the Jews in order to attack the world's Jewish state. Same way that people would talk about Gaza being a concentration camp prior to the war. If you look at the photos from Gaza prior to the war, it certainly wasn't a concentration camp. And coming from if you know your history, then you know what a concentration camp really is. And again, using these words, basically taking the most sensitive part of Jewish history and using it against the Jewish state, is really reprehensible. So the genocide word is used a lot. It's both obviously completely inaccurate, not based in fact whatsoever. All these conclusions made by various organizations have to completely change the definition. And yes, war is terrible. We all agree that war is terrible. Sometimes war is just. And this is an incredibly just war, a war of self-defense. And, those who want us to stop defending ourselves will throw these words out, because that's the easiest way to do it. To try and force this terrible word, the worst crime that can be committed, on Israel's actions, no matter what. But it just crumbles once you actually look at what the definition of genocide is and what Israel is actually doing in self-defense. It just crumbles.
I read Douglas Murray's latest book, and I think he mentioned that I think it was the day after October 7th, that in New York they were already saying Israel is committing genocide. Like, even after the defensive war hadn't even started yet, Israel is committing genocide.
It's not based in truth.
Yeah.
It's about rejecting our right to act in self-determination. That's it. And
how much of this is a conscious PR campaign from terror-supporting countries pushing a lot of money into a concerted effort to demonize Israel in the court of public opinion?
There is, of course, that. You only have to look at the amount that countries such as Qatar donate and contribute to campuses across the United States, and the influence that buys. Of course, there is this concerted effort, and if that's what you either read in the media as a student on campus or walking the streets, if that's what you see, it becomes fashionable. It becomes the new cause, and every now and again there's a new cause that captures the imagination of everybody, but it lacks completely substance or content. If you go beyond, if you were to go, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to go near these protests, but I would love to go there and ask these people, for a little bit more, to go a little bit deeper. Beyond the fact that you stand in the streets of Oslo and you chant from the river to the sea. Firstly, do you know from which river to which sea? And what does that mean? Or if you call to globalize the Intifada, what does that mean? There is a real lack of knowledge. But if it's fashionable to say, Israel is doing this, Israel is doing that, if it's fashionable to walk around and wear a keffiyeh, then you're part of something. You're part of a movement. You're part of something. But when you look into it, there's nothing there. There's nothing there, and we'll see now. The day after the ceasefire, you see how the Gazans celebrate the situation in the Gaza Strip. Everything that's been thrown at Israel and Israel has been accused of just doesn't exist there. But during the time of the campaign, people don't look to the truth. It's complex.
I find it so strange that actually a lot of pro-Palestinian protesters and this whole movement I would think it would settle down and calm down, but actually a lot of it is ramping up. And I don't understand it. Why would you ramp that up now? After the peace deal has started, IDF has retreated back from Gaza. How do you explain that this is ramping up?
So I wonder, and I think it gives a lot of food for thought, about what are the real intentions of those who are leading these campaigns. If it's about a ceasefire, well, starting 2 years ago, if you wanted a ceasefire, you'd call for the release of 250 hostages and the end of Hamas. It was that simple. We said from day one, the way to end this war is to release the hostages and for Hamas to give up its weapons. The day that the Americans came to the table with a deal that was backed by the entirety, both the Arab world and the Western world, and the hostages were released, and Hamas in some way, further down the plan is supposed to give up its weapons, then the war came to an end. Everything that we've been saying, that the war could come to an end tomorrow, is exactly what happened. So again, if those who are marching in the streets really want the best for the Palestinians, then you're right. They should be saying, ceasefire now. But the ones that need to be dismantled and to be eliminated in order to turn this into a sustainable ceasefire is Hamas. What's the point of a ceasefire if Hamas stays in position another 2 years or 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? We find ourselves having exactly the same conversations, that Hamas has committed another October the 7th, because there is no such thing as a sustainable ceasefire with Hamas in power. Hamas has to go. Otherwise, the ceasefire is inevitably limited in time. I don't know how long it would take, but the day after, they already start planning, as they have done in previous conflicts, previous wars, previous escalations. The moment that there is a ceasefire, it has only been a matter of time until the next war. And for the Israelis, for the Palestinians, for the Middle East, for everyone, it's in nobody's interest that happens again. So going back to the Palestinians or the pro-Palestinians on the streets, I'd hope that now they would demand the end of Hamas and a peace-seeking leadership for the people of Gaza. Will it happen? Well, we'll see.
How much of Hamas do you think Israel has been able to destroy? Like, I don't know if you have any percentages, like, would you say like 70 or 80% of Hamas is gone, or do you know? Have you got any numbers?
So I don't have the exact percentage, but it's in that area. Certainly, the entire leadership has been taken out in Gaza. The vast majority of the fighting force has been taken out. Now, what is Hamas? Immediately after the ceasefire, you start seeing Hamas officials coming, or fighters coming out of the tunnels, coming out of their homes. A Hamas fighter is a civilian until he puts on his uniform again. And they don't sit at home or in army bases in uniform. That's just not the Hamas strategy. So we're talking about tens of thousands of Hamas militants having been eliminated. When the Hamas Ministry of Health publishes its figures, it doesn't differentiate, doesn't distinguish. But I would imagine now in the coming days, Hamas will, as it licks its wounds, it will also talk about how many people it has lost. But as I said at the start, Hamas isn't a military organization anymore. Not at least not in the way that it was. It's a guerrilla organization. It will do its best now to try and exert control again over the Gaza Strip, and at least in the areas where Israel has withdrawn from. But we saw what that means. We saw already in the first few days after the ceasefire, Hamas militants executing Gazan civilians on the street, and the world and the public and the international community has to decide: is this what we want to see continue? Because this is the real identity of Hamas. They will do everything that they can now in order to get up and go again.
Are you concerned about, and is Israel concerned about, all of these terrorists that had to be released in order to get the Israeli hostages back? And are you concerned about them plotting and planning a new October 7th?
Of course. So the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip including on October the 7th, was Yahya Sinwar. He was released in an exchange of prisoners for Gilad Shalit going back 13 years or so.
Yeah, 1,000.
1,200. We released 1,200 Palestinian prisoners, many, like today, with blood on their hands. Sinwar, when he was in prison in Israel for acts of terrorism, we saved his life. He had a brain tumor and he was operated on, and ultimately he was released in the Gilad Shalit deal. And he was the one, after returning, that took over the leadership of Hamas in the Gaza Strip and planned and executed ultimately October the 7th. So we are aware of the price that we have to pay as a society. We're aware of the risk that these people may go back to terrorism. But that's I have a good friend, Eytan Halon, who was one of the spokespeople for the government of Israel at the start of the war. One of his objectives is to say we shouldn't call this a prisoner hostage deal or an exchange deal. This is a ransom. This is a ransom that Israel is having to pay in order to bring back its people. It's Israel is having to release thousands of terrorists, including some with blood of dozens of Israelis on their hands, just to get back its people. And there is absolutely no comparison. And only yesterday or 2 days ago, I saw there was this short article, a debate piece in Aftenposten. I said, we're talking about Israeli hostages, but why aren't we talking about the Palestinian hostages that are being released from Israeli prisons? These are convicted terrorists with blood on their hands. And, there is zero comparison to be made. But of course, it's a fear that these people go back to terror. But in order to get our people back, this is the price or the ransom that we have to pay.
But when you released the terrorists, how many were there, by the way, that you released?
This time, well, it's in stages, but we're talking about 3,000.
3,000?
Yeah, 3,000, 4,000.
But when you released them back to Hamas, did you give them complimentary pagers to go with?
Well, I'm certain that it's very clear that these terrorists, when they're released, they go back to participating in terrorism and terrorist activities, then they are going to be, followed and watched, and it's not in their interest if they wish to live a long time that they go back to terror.
But did they go back to Gaza or to other places?
The vast majority usually go back to Gaza, unless there is some sort of, in the past, there have been deals with third countries that accept them. But the vast majority, if not all of them, go back to Gaza. It's a challenge, not just a challenge in terms of their ability to go back to terror, but also think about the family members of the victims in Israel. Your family member has been murdered in a terrorist act, and the terrorist has been caught and sentenced to a life imprisonment in Israeli prison. And then suddenly after 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, they're released. It goes back to the core of Israeli society. And all these events, certainly at the moment, are really, really emotionally charged. I was listening to the comments of Rachel Goldberg-Polin. She's the mother of Hirsch, Israeli-American citizen who was murdered in captivity. And she said there's this paradox, and it's okay to both dance and cry at the same time. On one hand, we're dancing because our hostages are coming back alive. But at the same time, we're crying for those who are not coming back alive, for those who haven't come back yet, and for all of those that we've lost in the last 2 years. So I think it's a very Israeli phenomenon, that at the same time you have these two competing feelings. And someone told me, he said that there are 4 chambers in the heart in order to be able to cope with 4 different feelings at the same time. And they sit side by side. Just like when we celebrate our Independence Day in Israel every year, first we have 24 hours where we remember everyone who was lost, and then we have 24 hours where we celebrate our independence. And it shifts in a moment. It's a very Israeli experience, but it's one that everyone is wrestling with. We know that today there are families who are delighted because their loved ones have come home alive, and there are those who are receiving the bodies of their family members and taking them to burial. And how do we sit these two things side by side? It's a very complex and emotional moment for everyone in Israel.
It's almost like living in Israel or being Israeli, I would imagine, is life like on steroids, like a supercharged life, because you're living to the extremes, like extreme happiness and extreme sorrow and everything at the same time on top of each other in layers. And you have to be able to feel joy at the same time as being sad, or else you wouldn't exist, because there's so much going on all the time.
That's right. And everything happens so fast. Before I joined the ministry, I worked in the media. And I think what happens in Israel in a day happens in other countries in a week, maybe a month. And it's not just news; it's emotional. And we're a small country, where, similar to Norway, everybody knows each other, more or less. We're a small community. And you either know somebody directly or you know someone's family member. Or October the 7th met every Israeli. There was a personal connection for everyone. I also had a good friend who was killed in his community on the Gaza border on the first day of the war. He was part of the civilian response team in that community, in that kibbutz. And
which kibbutz was it?
Kerem Shalom. And there were a few of them that their job is, if there's an infiltration of terrorists, they go out, take a weapon and try and protect their community. And he was they heroically managed to save the kibbutz from a large number of terrorists, but he paid for his life in doing so. And everybody has this connection, either to someone who was killed, who was wounded, someone who was taken hostage. That's Israeli society. So there's a lot of emotion in these moments, and you have to be able to somehow take them all in and manage them. I say it can go from euphoria to sadness and joy and disappointment, and all these things happen together at the same time. It's a real challenge, and I'm not sure there are many countries or people in the world that have experienced this sort of. You have to live it and you have to feel it in order to really understand it.
Yeah, my condolences with your friend. It's terrible that he had to pay with his life like that. I visited when I was in Israel in March. I visited the kibbutz Kfar Aza, and was led there with had a little tour there with people who still live there, and just to be able to walk there and just seeing the bullet holes in the walls and seeing everything left just as it was on October 7th. I left everything there just in place, and it's like, and seeing pictures of the beautiful young couples who lived there and was slaughtered there, and it's like, it's so terrible. It's almost like a new kind of Auschwitz, in a sense that it should be. I feel like part of me, I think it should be left like that for a long time, for people to come and see for with their own eyes what actually happened there. And also I listen to the people who live there who, of course, also want to rebuild and start anew and won't let that define them. So it's different opinions. But also I got to meet with Edith Ohel, who is the mother of Alon Ohel. I was at their home, in his childhood home, sitting next to his piano that he played. And I remember thinking, I hope to God that he will come back there one day and be able to play that piano again, being with his family and his mother. And thank God, I would never actually, I hope for it, but I never believed that day would come. And just seeing these beautiful pictures that we've seen these last couple of days. And isn't it I think it's in the Torah that it says that whoever saves one life saves the whole universe.
That's right.
That's such a beautiful sentence that you can't really measure human lives by numbers, like amounts. It's like one life is a universe in itself.
That's right. And that's why we're willing to pay such a price in order to get these people home. Because Israelis have, not just Israelis, but within Jewish tradition and Jewish faith, there is this such great importance attached to life, and life is always prioritized. In every case, we should always strive to save lives wherever we can, and often that's what our enemies, who sanctify death rather than life, they exploit it in a certain way, because they know that we will pay a lot, or we will do a lot in order to save lives. And we see absolutely everybody as equal. We see within Judaism, it's one of the critical tenets of Judaism is that every person is made in the image of God, and it doesn't matter whether you're an Israeli, whether you're a Palestinian, whether everybody is seen as equal, and life should be sanctified. So that's why we're willing to pay such a price, aware of what could happen down the line. It's also part of the Israeli social contract, let's say, that when a parent sends their child to the army, they also know that should their child be taken hostage, for example, as we saw 2 years ago, that the state will do absolutely everything to get that person back. And that's something we've done repeatedly. Because Israel is this small society, that's what it's built on. It's built on one another looking after each other, but the state looking after every single one of its citizens, and really every one of its citizens, and doing the utmost to make sure that absolutely everybody is safe or brought back home.
That is the foundation of Zionism in itself, and is it that Israel should exist and be a safe harbor for Jews from across the world, and also, of course, its inhabitants, but also primarily Jews coming from the diaspora. And if there are pogroms and attacks and massacres, you can always, it's like a blue sign of emergency exit in wherever country you are in. Like, go to Israel, you'll be safe.
And that's why it's so sad that there's people take this word Zionism and they give it all sorts of other meanings. But that's what it is. Zionism is the belief in a Jewish homeland, in its ancient land, and it's a safe refuge, place of refuge, that any Jew, should they feel endangered, can go there and automatically find safety in that land. And something, with more than 75 years after the establishment of the State of Israel, Jews live quite comfortably all over the world. Well, firstly, the Holocaust wasn't that long ago. And Jew hatred didn't end in 1945.
Obviously.
We see it all over the world today. So it remains as relevant as it was then. It's important to stress that anybody who believes in the right of the Jews to self-determination, which is a universal right, is essentially a Zionist. I mean, that is the definition. No matter the places that others who campaign against Israel take this word and try to give it other meanings. Anybody who believes that the Jews have a right to their own homeland, that's being a Zionist. That's Zionism.
And what do you think about that stamp, that kind of branding that they try to give Israel? Is like, Israel is an apartheid state. Like, how do you counter that? How do you answer that when people say that?
Well, it's going back to this use of emotionally loaded terms without any connection to the reality on the ground. The best way to understand what Israel is to go there, is to visit. You walk around Israel and you understand that this is all fiction. You walk around Israel and you see the day-to-day coexistence, which to us is really nothing special. It is special, but it's also just day-to-day life. The judges in the Supreme Court are Jewish and Arab. Here, the Israeli national team came to play Norway just at the weekend. We won't talk about the result because it was pretty bad. But anyway, congratulations on almost reaching the World Cup. And the Israeli team, you had Jews and Arabs playing on the same team. That is the everyday coexistence, which when people call us an apartheid state, it's just the easiest way to see that it is absolute rubbish is to go to Israel and see how coexistence is just this daily part of life. And you see it in the street, you see it at work, you see it in government, you see it in as high as the Supreme Court. We've had Arab ministers in government. It's absolutely everywhere, and it's that sort of.
Didn't you have also an Arab Supreme Court judge actually sentence a prime minister to jail? Absolutely. So tell me, in what apartheid state does an Arab judge or a judge that belongs to the minority group sentence a majority group official? It's, in a debate, someone will say, well, Israel is this or that. And then that will force me to spend the next 5 minutes explaining why it isn't. Because that's the tactics, that's the strategy. I think to try to steelman their argument, what they would say to counter that is that, hey, Israel has all these border security fences and all these requirements to get into Israel. And in that sense, Palestinians aren't treated the way as Israelis are. But isn't that because of security and that they don't want intifadas? And
of course. So the main security barrier that was built along the West Bank was built at the height of the Second Intifada, when Palestinian terrorists were coming on a daily basis and suicide bombers and blowing up buses in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, and all of Israel's major cities. The moment that this barrier was built, then the number plummeted almost to zero. So it's an unfortunate fact of life, but it was built in order to save lives, and the checkpoints there are built to save lives, and very effective in doing so. But the only reason for that, the only reason, is not for separation, but is to prevent kids, adults, elderly people being blown up on the buses on their way to work or on their way to school. That is the sole reason for that barrier. And I'm very thankful that our government continues to invest in the sort of defensive infrastructure and technology that saves lives. It not just the security fence, but in terms of anti-missile technology, Iron Dome, David's Sling, the sort of technologies and infrastructure that allow us to save lives. If we look at the conflict or the operation in Iran and the huge barrages of ballistic missiles that were fired at Israeli civilians from Iran, without that sort of technology and investment in defense, then the casualty numbers would have been far, far greater, because the destruction was great. And the only thing that saved Israeli lives is the fact that we invested in defense infrastructure. And it's critical. It's critical.
Do you have the laser Iron Dome up and running now?
So it just received operational approval after about 20, 30 years of development. And it's a real potential game changer. Rather than having to refill ammunition, which is very expensive and can also run out in extreme circumstances or be overloaded, this laser should just be able to shoot down rockets in the sky very, very quickly. And doesn't require any sort of ammunition.
Did you know that kind of technology is just building up underneath the stereotypes and conspiracy against you as the Jewish space lasers?
Yeah, well, no, as you said, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. But it's that sort of investment in defense that other countries come to Israel and say, we need this. That. We want this.
Because now Finland is actually investing in Israeli technology for their defense, air defenses.
But many countries do.
Yeah.
Because Israel faces an unusual amount of... We have to use it for our own defense. So if a country wants to defend its own borders, if a country wants to defend its airports from drones, I mean, that's more relevant than ever here, then it knows that the best anti-drone technology, if you want to defend your airports, if you want to defend your critical infrastructure, is Israeli. Not just because technologically it's very advanced, but also because it's been proven. It's been proven to work. And Israel over the last 2 years has managed, while there have been mistakes, and we have, unfortunately, some missiles, some UAVs have managed to find their way through. No defense is 100%. Israel has proven that its defensive technology is the best in the world, and countries that wish to defend their people to the best level, and that's what I think every civilian hopes and wants from their government.
Because I wish that our Norwegian government would actually invest in Israeli military technology. That would be great for us, because we've seen just over our airports here in Copenhagen, and we see all these drones that they don't really know who's behind, but probably Russia. Why aren't we investing in the technology that works? And that brings me to another point, these boycotts. There's a BDS movement and the boycott of Israel. What do you think about that? And
well, there is this movement which has long been seen as extreme and on the sidelines. Now, they saw the war in Gaza as their opportunity to push forward their message and boycott. And ultimately, the reason for Norway to invest in Israel and Israeli technology, or any country, is not about investing in the Israeli economy. I mean, we enjoy it, but the reason for Norway to have the best defense technology is for Norway. The reason for Norway to cooperate with Israel on all sorts of matters is for Norway, Norwegian economy, Norwegian defense. So Norway and other countries have to look at the issues that they're dealing with. Norway has to protect its critical infrastructure, has to protect its airports, and it's in Norway's interest to dismiss these campaigns, very opportunistic campaigns of the boycott movement, and say we need to give the best to our citizens, and the best way to do that is to cooperate with a country that defends its citizens on a daily basis. So it's Norway's interest ultimately to dismiss the calls and the voices from this BDS campaign and say we want the best for our citizens.
Let's talk about the peace plan developed by Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu, and all of these Arabic Muslim nations are in on it. It's a 20-point plan, I think.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that? And do you have hopes that it will actually last? Do you think it'll work? And what's it looking like right now?
Well, I think these are early days. The first stage was to stop the war and to release the hostages. Now, we're not all the way there. Hamas still has to release the bodies of other hostages. But there is a real international effort to see this through to the end. But it's a process. And these really are the first moments. This is the beginning, it's not the end. If we want to avoid reaching the same situation where Hamas continues to control the Gaza Strip and launches another war and another war, then we have to see this through to the end. That requires a huge international effort to make sure that it happens, to make sure that Hamas is not part of the day after. This plan has a lot of potential to make the Middle East a very, very different place. And it's in the interest of most of the countries in the Middle East. And that's why also they're buying into this plan. In the same way that we normalize relations with Bahrain and the UAE, and we're seeing the benefits of it, there are other countries in the Middle East who face both the same threats as we do, notably the Iranian threat, which brings many countries, the moderate states, together, but also the economic benefits, the diplomatic benefits. And countries that want to be part of this new Middle East are embracing it. And President Trump has managed to bring all these countries together behind one plan, which is no easy task. And now we have to continue working together to do it. But as I said, it's a long process. It's not something that's going to happen today, tomorrow, in the next week, the next month. It's a process that's going to last years. And one of the critical ways of putting this plan into implementation, or implementing this plan, and this is where also Norway has an important role, is that Gaza needs to be reconstructed and rebuilt for the benefit of the civilians there. But it needs to be done in a way which, differently to the past, where the aid flowed into Gaza, but also flowed into the hands of Hamas, and as much was built underground as was built overground, this time it cannot happen again. And those countries that wish to provide aid to Gaza, which is welcome, including Norway, have to make sure that that aid reaches the right people. And it goes to the civilians, and it goes to building their houses and apartments and infrastructure, and not to building tunnels and terror infrastructure underground.
How can we make sure of that it goes to the right people?
Well, there have to be mechanisms in place, and that aid doesn't just go straight to the end user, to the current Hamas leadership. There has to be some sort, and the Trump plan, well, is lacking in details in various parts, and this all has to be done through negotiation. There has to be a lot of conversations, but that will be a critical element of it. That reconstruction is obviously necessary, but it has to be done in a way which is sustainable, because otherwise we find ourselves, as I've said, in the same place again and again and again, and that is not in anybody's interest.
What is interesting is that in 2014, as we mentioned briefly, the whole world, like almost 80 nations, joined in a concerted effort to destroy and dismantle ISIS. Everybody agreed that we cannot have such an organization that is as brutal, as terrible, and as dangerous as ISIS. Why aren't the world looking upon Hamas the same way?
I think the issue there is that Israel is involved. And unfortunately, despite the interest and despite the fact that Hamas is a mutual enemy of all of us, a shared enemy, there are countries that will not cooperate with Israel no matter what. And we see it in the United Nations, for example. Israel could bring a proposal that the world is round, and the UN would vote it down and say the world is flat. There's an inability to cooperate with us, which is ultimately to the detriment of not just Israel, but to the entire peace-seeking world. So we understand that whatever we do, we have to do it by ourselves, often with the assistance of our allies. The Americans are the key example, especially in Iran, shooting down, there was a huge international effort to shoot down the ballistic missiles and UAVs that were fired by Iran. And also the Americans helped us when we went and attacked the Iranian nuclear program. But we understand that ultimately we are responsible for our own security. We have to do it for ourselves. We cannot outsource our security to other nations or international organizations. You can't defend a country like that. If the world doesn't want to support us in doing what's necessary to protect our civilians, then we do it ourselves.
Because I also saw Trump, I think it was yesterday, on some kind of Instagram clip where he said that because he was asked, what if Hamas doesn't dismantle, doesn't disarm? And then he answered like, Hamas will disarm, trust me. And if they don't, we will disarm them for them. So it's like...
I think now, certainly the Americans have proved that they mean what they say. And the Americans said when it came to Iran, that if Iran doesn't stop its nuclear program, they will act. And it wasn't a bluff. The Americans came with their B-52 bombers and took out, together with us, Iranian nuclear infrastructure. And the Americans have proved that they can bring together this huge coalition of countries in order to back this plan. And I would be very wary, I think, today, if I was a Hamas leader, wherever I'm sitting in Qatar or Gaza, of not believing what the Americans have to say. Because the current president is showing that he means what he says, and that restores American deterrence, Israeli deterrence, that we don't just, it's not just words. It comes with meaning.
And how important is that, in particular in the Middle East, to follow up on your word?
Absolutely. The Middle East, the strong survive. If you're weak in the Middle East, then you're taken advantage of and you don't last very long. That's why it's critical, and the Americans work together with us, that we will always have the qualitative edge when it comes to military equipment and abilities in the Middle East.
Because I wonder if that is a part of the misunderstanding from here in Norway in particular, that we don't understand the culture of the Middle East, is that we look up on our safe little bubble here in Scandinavia and think that we have a humility culture and a culture of trust, where trust is assumed, is not earned. It's like assumed that we can trust each other. And we have this humility where it's a virtue to apologize and look upon yourself and what did I do wrong in this situation. While in the Middle East, it's almost upside down, isn't it? That you have to, like Trump says, it's peace through strength, that you have to have deterrence. Would you say that it's a misunderstanding going on from European countries? And,
definitely.
Yeah.
I think one of the clearest examples, and I hear it a lot, that most hostages were released through diplomatic means, through diplomatic agreements. I mean, yes and no. It's only part of the story. The only thing that brings Hamas to the negotiating table is when it feels sufficiently defeated or under threat by military means. If Hamas was interested in coming to the negotiating table, then after the horrific massacre on October the 7th, they would have come to the negotiating table on October the 8th and said, okay, we'll release 251 hostages in return for this and that. It doesn't work like that. Nations only come to the negotiating table, or nations or terrorist organizations only come to the negotiating table when they're feeling enough military pressure to do so. Without military pressure, there is no diplomatic solution. And that's sometimes misunderstood. So to say that most hostages were released by diplomatic means, yes, ultimately there was a diplomatic agreement that led to the release of the hostages. But the only way to reach that diplomatic agreement is through military means and military pressure. And so we have to be honest about that and say it's a combination.
Because I think that's a bit counterintuitive to most people in Norway, you know, where we have in Norway, it's a really high virtue, the dialogue culture. We're really interested in dialogue. I think that's the way that Norway wants to present itself on the world stage too. We're like the nation of dialogue. We're the nation of trying to negotiate and being the peace partner and everything. And we believe that dialogue is important, which it is, right? But in the Middle East is different. Like deterrence is important, like strength and military, and
That's
you
right.
have to teach the other countries how to treat you.
That's right. And dialogue is important. And I appreciate that stance. But nobody said when ISIS was slaughtering, the Yazidis, we have to sit down around the negotiating table with ISIS and find a diplomatic solution. There are organizations, terrorist groups in this world that, if we want peace, need to be destroyed. ISIS is one of them. Hamas is another. There is no room at the negotiating table for organizations like this. And so we have to be very clear about that.
Yeah. Eytan, thank you so much for coming here today. It was a pleasure getting to know you and to speaking with you. And I wish you the best of luck and a good stay here in Norway for your term here. And also, I hope that this peace deal will hold. And I think that both of us, and Israelis and Jews alike, all we want is peace and to be able to live in peace with people and our neighbors and everyone. So I hope for peace.
Thank you. Thank you very much for hosting me. And it's ultimately our mutual hope, mutual interest. And let's hope that this is the start of something more positive, more peaceful, and finally some room for optimism in our complicated part of the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.